call this City Council pre-session, August 11th, 2026, 6 p.m. meeting to order. And we'll go ahead and start with the roll call. Mary Valvo Faring.
Councilmember Popkin.
Mayor Pro Tem Shelby.
Harold Dominguez, City Manager.
Dean May, City Attorney.
Councilmember Prieto. Becky Doyle, Utilities and Public Works. Councilwoman Diane Chris.
Councilmember Cowcoffer. Councilmember Jake Marsing.
Do we need
Staff
everybody in the? It's not necessary.
No.
No, okay, just council. Okay, so we have some meetings to discuss. I had allotted 2020 and 20, although you had, Councilmember Chris mentioned that possibly C won't go as long, or was it A?
Yeah, there's a little presentation, but it's actually fairly
Okay,
easy.
I mean, if you wanted to flip-flop A and C, I think B is what you brought forward. So it won't affect the meeting, but if you wanted to address C first, which one are you ready to discuss first?
C.
C, okay, well, let's go ahead and do C. We're just gonna flip-flop, is that, should I have given 24-hour notice? I'm not adding anything, I'm just flip-flopping. So we're doing, item C, discuss prioritizing Spring Gulch number 2, CIP 045, designed in 2028 and pushed to 2029. So, if you want to provide a little bit of background and,
Certainly.
and
And does that
intent.
work for you, Sam, to bring
Yep.
that up first?
Absolutely.
All right. So, thank you to those of you that have looked at the deep dive, which was the meeting with the water board. Share.
Sure. Or, yeah, we're gonna share.
Here's the actual DR 045, just so you can see what's going on with that.
You want them out? Or do you want
So
me to just
the-
move through as you tell me to?
Do you mind?
Not at all.
Okay, so, the public in, Pleasant Valley came to us with a concern. They scheduled a walkthrough with the staff and then also with me, because I could only do it on Saturday that day. This is the way the greenway looks. It appears as like bright green paint has been dumped in here as thick as soup, and it's not moving. Next. Here is the original map from Jim Crick. It doesn't really show, but the trail follows these blue lines. It starts at above Highway 66, and then it goes down to the golf course. And this is the Pleasant Valley neighborhood. So as you can see, it runs through the center of their neighborhood. Next. Okay, there was not enough slope. It's too wide. It's the opinion of the water board is that there's a lot of nutrients there that is causing excess vegetation growth. And this year there's stagnant water because there isn't enough storm water to move things through. It's just pooling and sitting there. Next. Here's the photos. So this was a picture of the first one. This is on the other side of the bridge where Olympia goes through. I think this is showing mostly the vegetation, how it's so blocked you can't even see the water. And then this is on the north side of Highway 66 where it's still pooling there, in other words, not flowing. And actually, originally there were ducks nesting in this area right in here, and they moved up here and splashed around. So that tells you how they feel about it. Okay, next. Some comments from the neighborhood. They brought this to water board in June and also in July. At the time that I went, the trail is very close. I bicycled on that trail. It was very stinky, like almost overwhelming in certain places. So they're asking that we prioritize DR 045. It was originally started in 2018. It has gone forward unfunded. We talked about how can we improve the smell and just the quality of life there. There wasn't a real solution to that in that we don't have the equipment and the funding to pull out the cattails. And then there was a conversation with Parks and Recreation about signage there, maybe because Rough and Ready is also dry right now, and so children were going up there with fishing poles to fish in that green paint. Okay, continue. This tells you, you know, it started way back. There was actually an earlier CIP, I don't think that is on here, 28, which handled the more southern area of it. Okay, so then there was gulch access and maintenance. Then it was unfunded, then it was unfunded, then it was partially funded. Then it went into the water department for funding, restoration. And then they did 400K of channel improvements. But then it got renamed DRN 045, back again to DR 045, which I think is Public Works. Funding is to be determined. Continue. Okay, so we talked about could they do testing to make sure it's safe? Are there airborne, you know, algae? Is that a consideration? They only do, according to their protocols, they only do testing if it's a recreation area. And then we also have the same problem with the signage, is that if we start signage up at this area, then it expands the scope of where we need to do signage. So, here we are back again as to what can we do. Next slide. So, here's the project description. I don't know if that's easy for any of you to read, but it is also kind of on the top of that DR 45. It's a little bit different. But what they want to do, and there have been other maintenance at the southern end, but what we're looking at is something up from 66 down to Pace. Next. So this is from GIS. They do better maps. And what it shows is what is feeding this. So here's the gulch. That's blue. And you can see that it starts in agricultural land, but this yellow that comes in is from Walmart wastewater. And then if you'll notice, up in this area, everything is lateral.
Stormwater.
Oh, I'm sorry, stormwater. Did I say waste?
Yeah. I was like, ew.
Ooh, I caught your attention.
Different problem.
Sorry, that is stormwater. As you can imagine, we haven't had very many storms, so it hasn't really moved. That's why they're huddling up there. Everything is lateral going into it, which kind of speaks to the geography of it. And so as you get down here, and then this comes the southern part. So here's, goes into U Creek Golf Course. So here we're going here. You notice that all that feeds it is actually south moving. So it has more momentum and the water flow improves at this point. So the real work needs to happen in this northern section. Okay, that's what I've got for presentation. Thank you to everyone that listened to the water board. They had a lot of knowledge about like why is this happening over and over again and every year. And I think if you had a chance to read those, maybe you could go back to some of the comments. I think it mentions that, you know, they see children fishing, there's cyclists, they worry about mosquitoes, and the houses are fairly close if you looked at the map. But also, it's been going on for years. So it's a problem every year, and especially during the summer when it gets hot. So they're asking us to prioritize the CIP. It's actually a DRN right now. That's what it will look like when it comes to us in the budget. In the meantime, I don't see that Jim Angstead is here, but they are expecting a
Becky's here.
a what?
Becky's here. I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Becky's the head of it all. They're expecting an extractor, so maybe you could speak about the extractor a little bit.
Yeah, they're expecting delivery of a spider excavator that will actually be able to go into that area where we haven't had access previously.
Wow.
To maintain it in the October timeframe. October.
Yeah, Jim was saying September, October. He said he was 70 to 80% sure that you might get it for the end of the year.
Yes.
You concur? Okay.
Yeah.
And then this, because there's a problem getting into the gulch as well, they want to eventually make it into a deeper, not as wide, so the water will flow better at the north end. So that's the purpose of the DRN. In the meantime, the excavator will be here. That's already been funded. But here's the question, do we have to fund the work?
we have to fund the.
Yeah, I mean,
we
the-
would
the
have to
labor.
fund the work.
Okay.
Oh, no, no,
Not the
the
labor.
labor to operate the excavator is already
Is
included
already-
in the budget, yes.
But then here's something, the water board, increase my knowledge, is that what do you do with the material after you excavate it?
Correct.
So there's usually an expense for that too.
If you have to dispose of the material, yes, if you're
Okay.
able to use it.
Yeah. So I don't.
Coming off of an agricultural, property, there's likely some pesticides and things like that, that would be that might be contributing somewhat to this. Also, the drought that we're experiencing might be part of that problem. Do we think that after we do some, maybe, depending on our weather conditions in the fall and the dredging of that to clean it out, I mean, it's not gonna be long-term, but it's gonna be, something that we always deal with. It's just kind of something we always have to clean out, like we do with the golf course, different phases of it to clean it up, and we see that elsewhere. I just wonder, I know there's probably, we don't have signs there saying, that it's ditch water, that don't play in it, but that should be somewhat obvious. But, I have behind my neighborhood, they have moved out Garkey ditch running through that over, and that, the kids know not playing it, they just pull crawdads out of it, and everything. But that's a concern that right now, in a more difficult budgeting year, we're already getting this. I think we're doing probably more than has been done in a while.
Do we think that the situation will improve once we arrange but remove the material? Will there be some improved flow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Love the
not
confidence.
perfect.
Jim Angstead seemed to think that it would last about 2 years, maybe 3, in terms of improvement.
To be scheduled.
Yeah.
So we have to put it on a 2-year cycle to continue to clear out.
Or make the scheduled improvement from DRN over 5, on 2-year cycle.
Well,
If we were to, so
once you get to
I'm looking at a basically $4.5 million CIP project here. So if we were to shift it up, would we basically shift the year 2, year 3 to year 1, year 2? Is that Councilmember Prister
We would
suggests?
shift the design to 2027.
So design would be next year, and so we could all move up basically a year. What would that displace from the
Yeah.
current CIP planning?
Yeah, that's my question.
And that, I think, the designing is about 370,000.
Yeah, it's getting the 4.5 by adding those together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's more expensive as we go.
I mean, it would. So when we look at our capital improvement plans, whether they're in the public improvement fund, if you move that much funding up, then what we're doing is essentially unfunding other projects. And so what we would have to go over with you all is really what's the nature of the project and what are, what's the trade-off in that decision, because like one that I can think of that is funded is the replacement of stormwater mains in some of our older sections of the community where we've actually had failures and then the road collapses inward on it. We actually had one just on 9th or 6th.
Yeah, and that's part of the schedule is the improvements on 9, so that we don't have additional failures in the storm sewer.
Harold, when does the council see the CIP for the first time?
It'll be September 1st this year. So I think, that's part of when we go into the budget is really looking at, it's trade-offs within the funds in terms of do we fund this or do we fund this? And I think that's part of the conversation where, our responsibility is to tell you, if we don't fund this, then here's the risk here. If we don't fund this, here's the risk here, because they all bring different burdens in terms of what we're trying to solve. The stormwater fund honestly has been pressed, primarily because of, a big part of it's been really the work that we've been doing as part of RSVP and the Resilient St. Vrain project. In terms of after that flood, I kind of talked to you all about the budget process where we had to reprioritize all of our capital projects in order to have the matching funds that we needed for those projects. And so that's really been a big part of what's really strapping that fund.
And the biggest upcoming projects in the Storm Drainage Fund is that final stretch of RSVP from Sunset to Hober that really takes the rest of the property out of the floodplain. So that's the big rock, I think, that we're up against in that fund.
And how big is that, dollar-wise?
15 to 20 million. So depending on where bids come in for that, there might be some available funding, or we size the debt issuance to fund that
Right.
accordingly. So that's.
And so then, when we look at the funding sources based on, so then we have to look at what's the intent of the project, how was it built, which fund actually has to have, which fund is the owner of the project, which we're going through in a lot of cases, which means we can't just take funding from the water fund for a storm drainage project or funding from the wastewater fund, because there has to be a very clear nexus in terms of moving that funding around. And you'll see some of this in the budget process. The only fund that you really have flexibility of moving funds from into other places is the general fund. And, you know, again, spoiler alert, we saw the property tax numbers come in. And honestly, right now, Teresa and I are contemplating a reduction in revenue from the property tax. Not even flat, but a reduction in property tax revenue. So, a lot of things in play.
When they do the dredging of the removing the material, is it appropriate that we get some kind of inspection report or survey report that says like, hey, you know, once we cleared it, this is what we noticed, and this is the severity of the situation, just so we can get a sense of what we're dealing with?
From what perspective?
Just the condition of the channel and, you know, what.
Yeah, some feedback on further work that might need to happen. We know it needs to be deepened, but
That wouldn't-
how long do they think this will be effective?
And the
That wouldn't be-
gradient, the
hold on,
gradient.
Becky.
Okay.
That wouldn't be typical for operational work.
Yes,
So I think what we would have to do, I mean, as we're looking at this, if they go in and dredge it, there is a point that you have to evaluate what the as-built were versus what you're dredging to.
Sure.
So there will be some assessment on it, and then I think we'll probably, I'm looking at Chris, we'll probably pull the soils to the wastewater plant? Or where we
To dry them?
To dry them?
Out at the Well County Road 5.
Oh, well, County Road 5, so
If there's room there.
we'll pull the soils there to dry them, and then if we can reuse the soils in other projects that we have, we'll do that. And so there's a process for that. If for some reason you came across something that was indicative of a contaminant, then we would, under CDPHE rules, have to go in and test and do all of that other stuff.
So we're at about 20 minutes on this one, and we're not giving direction, because it's a pre-session. But just, thanks for bringing this forward, and just for future, when this does come back, I mean, I think it would be a great opportunity to discuss, that process, further, and what is council's role in this? It just seems like a lot of it is operational. I mean, it comes to us when, does it come to us when we shift? Because I've talked to Joan about this in the past, where we've seen things that were funded and then they're unfunded because something has shifted.
So it depends. So if it's within the funding, if it's within the fund and we're allocating, you don't have to approve those adjustments. If it's a different piece where we're moving it across funds, then those do go to council, right, Teresa? There's two pieces to that.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, so that,
And
that's.
they both go to council, correct, or just
No,
one?
well, they both go, one is just accepting my adjustments. And then,
Okay.
depending on the nature of it, if it's a budget change, then they have to act on it, right?
That's right. Changing scope, yeah.
Change its scope and things,
Yes.
add value to that, so.
But Mayor, you certainly could ask this question when the CIP
Yeah.
is released.
Yeah,
and
to
you
look
see
at what.
all the projects are.
Yeah, to look at what all the projects are, and, you know, if something gets bumped forward like this, what's going to be bumped down? I mean, I
Right.
think it's important for us as council to see what the full scope is.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think when we present it, we do tend to, I mean, as we presented the stormwater fund recently, we've gone over it in more detail, primarily because of RSVP.
Yeah.
And I think in this case, when we present it, they can go over and say, okay, if we move $1 million from here, this is where we'd have to take the $1 million from.
Thank you. Okay, item B, discuss how we can better align rates, existing, future, with policy goals in advance of, in relation to the water waste rates conversation. So this one, yeah, so it's.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have zero elaborate presentation
Yeah.
for this, but figured I'd prompt, just since we had this pre-session before our broader policy discussion later today, why don't you just prompt more of the principle and the concept rather than the specific nitty-gritty for the waste rate discussion here. I think all of us over the last, let's say, a couple of months, if not multiple years, if you've been in the role for longer, have either had to face tough decisions on either raising taxes or raising rates or raising fees, and I think we all love doing that. No, obviously not. That's like the least favorite part of this, and it's just also a necessary thing. We're seeing costs rise in a lot of different ways, from supply chain impacts to just inflationary costs, and that's a reality that we can face. And so, when we had this discussion last summer and fall, and I appreciate Mary kind of adding some emphasis to bring this back up. Part of the conversation was oriented around, well, we're raising rates already to cover cost of service. And then I think a logical follow-up question there for us to consider is, in these situations when we know we have to raise rates to increase cost of service, or when we have existing rate structures and we're trying to meet existing policy goals, how can we better align the rates that we do currently have without increasing further with the policy outcomes we're trying to strive for? And I think that is just a way of better optimizing the revenue that we're getting and the rate tools. Rates are one key policy tool that we have. And irrespective of waste, composting, recycling, which I know we'll be focusing on tonight as part of the impetus for that, we have a lot of different rate structures in the city. And so as we start to think about what are our policy goals that are related to that, one of those policy goals is and should continue to be, in my opinion, cost of service. But it doesn't have to be the only objective. And so I think that's what I wanted to kind of start and get a feel for, maybe both where people are on kind of that as a concept overall, and if there's any history and like from prior councils and kind of how folks have thought about this in the past. So that's how I'll open it up, and we'll go from there.
Thanks for bringing this to pre-session, so that we can have a discussion earlier than our session. You know, I just want to throw in that the NGLA has talked about composting extensively, actually, because a lot of people from the neighborhood groups don't utilize composting because of the expense of it. But one thing that they have very cleverly started doing is having one household have a compost, because they're large bins, and then having, you know, maybe 5 households contribute to that. And also contribute to the cost, which is about $1 a household at this time. You know, $2. Still very affordable. And actually, as we were talking to the residents, I think you and I were in that particular discussion, but I know you've been involved with their upgrades. They were talking about how they have small garages and they can't have big bins in there, so they also cannot compost. And so having a neighborhood compost bin, which are the full-size ones, is a reasonable alternative. And I'm wondering if that would actually increase the usage of composting rather than decrease it. I know it seems like we would be, you know, using less and less bins, but a lot of people aren't doing it now because they can't afford it on their own. Oh, and just one other thing while I'm thinking about it. I know most of you are out of town or at work, but I'm going to the compost facility tomorrow, Wednesday at 3 p.m. We have to be there at 3 p.m. Up in Netherlands to see how they're doing it. So we were originally going to have a compost presentation, do you remember, Harold? But that just, so now I'm going to the compost heap instead. So I wish others could join me. Okay, go ahead.
One question that I've always had is, the only different sizes that we have is for waste, but we don't have different sizes for recycling and or compost. Is there a reason for that?
I've seen smaller,
You've seen smaller composts?
smaller recycling.
Recycling?
You do?
Oh, we do.
Smaller recycling
Oh.
option. There used to be.
Mhm.
There's just only a certain number of bins.
It's because we do it every 2 weeks, right? So it's not every week, so essentially it's half the collection.
Because as a
As the-
compost customer, I probably have it once a month at its school, and I know in Boulder they have smaller compost bins. And I don't know if it's something that we can look at, you know, if we increase compost services, that we have different flavors of compost versus something.
Certainly help
I
if
think
you
that
did.
would be less expensive, in other words, be at a lower price point though.
So,
Is there staff that want, oh, go ahead.
so yeah, maybe I'll just clarify.
Yeah.
There may be two things we're discussing here.
Yeah.
One, there's the broader concept of like how interested are we as a council in trying to realign rate structures overall, not just like agnostic of whether it's waste or electricity or other utilities or cost of service that we have. And then how do we want to best address our waste rate structures? And that's much more of an operational cost conversation and relates to the policy conversation we'll have later today. So I just wanted to differentiate between those two. The one other thing I'll just add in and why I wanted to bring this up in more of a conceptual level first is the downside, the consequence of not doing this, at least from my perspective, is actually an inefficiency of how we're trying to meet our goals. And when there's inefficiency, there is greater cost to actually achieve those goals. And so if we have a waste diversion target, just to use this as, I have the notes on it, of 75% citywide waste diversion by 2030 and 95% by 2050, if we don't align our rate structures with those goals, then we'll have to increase either taxes or fees to have staff who do other programs, who do other types of work to try to meet those goals, or we'll have to invest in other infrastructure that achieves those goals in different ways. And currently, we have a structure that actually slightly disincentivizes, well actually, in my opinion, substantially disincentivizes composting relative to trash, and actually disproportionately slightly weighs the largest volumes of waste disposal versus smaller volumes. So we're kind of incentivized, we're actively incentivizing the opposite, or discouraging what we're trying to aim for. So from an efficiency standpoint, from an overall cost standpoint on all of our residents and businesses, I think that the more, if we're comfortable with this, the more we can align our rate structures with those policy goals, the less work we have to do at an individual staff level or an infrastructure investment. Councilmember Vito?
Did you want to?
I was going to say, I like what I heard from Councilmember Kristen in the sense that I know some of these HOA community areas of our community do require them to pull the bins into the garage or behind the fence in their backyard. Even that is somewhat questionable. The smaller bin, to Councilmember Kolkoffer's point of view, is I think maybe we get more people to say, yeah, because I mean, I have a big one that gets filled maybe really filled 6 times a year. And the rest of the time is just kind of at the bottom of it. And I think if we had a little bit smaller bins, I would have to do more trips to the tree limb if I wanted it out of the yard faster. But it would be more efficient to get that compost if it was a smaller bin, the size of the smaller yellow top.
Just a temperature kind of for where I'm at. I agree with you, Councilmember Topkin. I think that our policies should be aligned with the actuals of like where we're at as a city, what things cost. But I'm more drawing back some of those pie in the sky ideas to make them more realistic with what we can do given budget constraints, etc. And then if staff can be innovative around incentivizing or getting more people to opt in, great, because then it spreads the costs throughout. But it's kind of in alignment with the policy or the discussion that we had at, is it Platte River Power Authority? Where, we want to make sure that our policy goals are not increasing charges for our residents. And that's the one thing that I came to council kind of vouching, that I wasn't going to just keep pushing up these rates for our residents. And making sure that the rates actually match just the needs, but not these pie in the sky goals and great ideas, which are great if we have the money, but if we don't, then really just meeting the minimum.
Councilmember Marcy.
Thanks, Mayor. I was gonna save some of this for the conversation later, but I think it's relevant, big picture. I totally agree about using rates to pursue goals generally. I do, when we get into the specifics of how we do that, there are equity concerns that I get raised with. So one of the things I'll talk about tonight, I'm a little concerned that subsidizing compost through solid waste at that level doesn't necessarily actually change behaviors to encourage composting, and may actually just be charging solid waste customers more. And that's a question I'm going to ask of staff because I don't know the answer to that. But in general, I'm sympathetic to, I think, where Councilmember Prieto's at, which is if we're going to target rate structures around policy goals, we need to make sure that we understand the trade-offs fully and what that actually means for residents and how they will experience. The majority of our residents will experience that, because if we're going to say, okay, we're going to raise this rate here because we have this policy goal over here, are we actually going to be able to get the policy goal by raising the rate? And that's a practical implication that I don't know. So there's an equity concern.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Ryan. For temperature check, I am interested in looking at rates because I do want us to incentivize people for using less either garbage or electricity or water. And in my personal opinion, the current fee structure doesn't really incentivize. Sure, there's, the more water you use, you're on a higher tier, but in my opinion, there's really no incentive for using less when it either comes to compost. That's why I brought the composting. Paying $6 for this big bin, and I only use a fourth of it. So I would like us to look at rates holistically to make sure that we're incentivize people using less water, using less electricity, using less garbage.
Well, last thing, I was on council in 2028. We had a
Good for you in the future.
Dang.
2008.
He's naming it and claiming it over here.
This was
Got plans for next year.
We had a kind of a charrette sort of thing around the idea of getting to this point where at Skyline High School, and it has taken that long to get to here. I think I don't want us to fall behind because of the idea that it's going to be a little bit more expensive. I hear exactly where Councilmember Pareto and Marsing are coming from, but on the other hand, sometimes once you get these goals and that juggernaut of that way of thinking and the people moving in the right direction, it becomes cost effective, and I think we start to see that. Do I think that maybe to get people in the right direction when we know that the population of Longmont is starting to become more senior in age, and they're using probably less trash, and less recyclable things, just because that maybe we need to look at different sides to help keep those folks moving, continuing to do the right thing, and continuing to help us meet our goals. So it is important.
In the meantime, there's an offer for us to come fill your bin for you.
Sure.
Leave your trash at the mayor pro tem's house. That's what I heard.
Well, and one of the setbacks to composting was that they stopped allowing, you know, the compostable paper products. So that was a setback, I think, in what we were all trying to achieve. But I would like to hear from staff as far as like, so what are some of the things that you all have seen as far as our current rate structure? How is that, looking at, because I do agree that we kind of disincentivize composting. What would be some recommendations, or what would be some best workarounds to incentivize, to make people more willing to want to compost? And what would be the advantage, other than it's the right thing to do?
Do you have a whole presentation?
Later.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So if I
Yeah,
can-
move it on.
So maybe some level setting
Yeah.
for council. And so, when we created composting, we had a very similar conversation to this. And I think we presented options of, well, do you want to set the rate here and set the trash rate here to
Yes.
incentivize it? And it was a pretty controversial topic when we dealt with it at that point.
And this was before
And-
I was on council.
Yeah, this was before.
Yeah,
so-
because I remember like being on the other
And
side.
then
listening
so
in.
they were debating things like opt-in, opt-out.
Yeah.
That's an interesting conversation, because in talking to composting advocates, what they're really finding is that the quality of the compost is actually better if it's opt-in versus when they had the opt-out. So there's a distinct difference between the quality
Yeah.
of the materials that we send in versus other jurisdictions. Now, that's not where the conversation, I think at the time the advocates were saying opt out, and
Yes.
even as
Yeah,
I've
I
talked to
remember that.
advocates
Yeah.
recently, they're like, oh, the opt-in makes sense because it's the quality. So that was a piece of it, and then what was behind the conversation is when you look at the cost structure, the bulk of the cost is actually in the equipment and the staff to run the routes. So when we look at our cost structure and all of our sanitation services, you have tipping fees that are associated with the product, and then you have the cost of the operations. And what they evaluated at the time was really, if we do it every other week, here's the cost of composting versus if we do it every week. And so the council at the time was, I think, trying to find a balance point on it. But we did talk about, well, do we charge more for trash here and less for composting here? And that was just their policy direction at that point, which I think is getting at what the conversation's about.
Yes.
Where do you want to go?
And that also gets to the question about why do we have large bins for composting? That was trying to control that initial capital investment in the trucks and the carts and things that were required to collect it. The reason that they're large 96-gallon bins is because we were using the trash cans and just putting new lids on them because we wanted people to downsize their trash. But then we could still use the same, kind of leftover bins that we had to do the compost. So there is, I think, an opportunity to think about like what that looks like operationally. But it's all tied back to that. How do you start a new service? And how do you kind of, get that going and get the buy-in?
Thank you for that historical piece. That was what I was trying to get at. And because these conversations, after you've been on council for a while, it's like, this isn't new. I've yet to see anything that's really new. It's just kind of brought up, but brought up in a different way, different mindsets. And so I think, tying in that historical context, there's a reason why. Thank you for reminding about the lids, because I remember when, they just flipped out the lids. And so there was rationale behind that. It wasn't just because, well, let's just do it this way just for fun, see what happens.
And I do think financially and operationally, what we were trying to do when you're starting a new service is you don't want to set your operating cost here, which then means your rates have to be here, which then decreases it. So by looking at reusing equipment and reusing things, they could lower the operational cost
Yes.
to then get more people to come in. That was the conversation.
Okay.
Maybe just the last point I'll make here
Yeah,
before
yeah.
we go into
We'll go
later.
to the last one.
you know, we already do cross-subsidize different programs in the city. We'll use certain revenue streams from one area to subsidize or incentivize something in another area. What we haven't done, at least from my experience to the same degree, is really looking at when we do have a rate structure overall, how are we really aligning that with the policy goals that past councils and this council have set and or affirmed. And so just, I mean, as a simple example, you know, we have a waste management fee that cross subsidizes other Main Street cleanup and downtown cleanup. And that is just, that's not Main Street paying for that, but it's something that we think is a community value to cover the cost there, right? I think all electric customers cover the CARES rebate program, right? If they pay into that system there to help lower income and bill assistance type programs. So we have some history of doing this. It's just a question of really figuring out kind of where we want to optimize for that, and then how do we want to apply it in different situations. So thank you for the precursor conversation.
Yeah, sure.
I do want to be careful with something, so nexus is important. So the waste management fee is really covering the waste collection, not the overall cleanup. The LPC is covering the LPC's portion of their piece, because behind all of this, why I needed to say this to make sure everybody's on the same page is if you move money out of, it's a charter provision, so if we move money out of the electric fund into another fund that doesn't have nexus to it, then we can't raise the rates in the electric fund. By charter, same for water. And so that gets into the fund accounting principles that we have to be careful with. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that, so somebody doesn't think we're moving year to year.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yep. And now the final topic, how we can include those with a Longmont address, but they're county residents. How can we include them in public divided here?
Yes, an important topic we need to discuss. And
Yes.
And as I've researched this, I don't have any suggestions.
Yeah.
Sandy, could you bring up that link about the zip codes? Because that's where I started, is with the zip codes. I thought, well, how hard would it be to tailor around the zip codes? Sandy's recommended you.
Can somebody put the Google search City of Longmont in Google Maps just so we can see where the
Yeah, that's
City of Longmont?
this looks good.
Oh, pretty easy.
And I actually show the city too. Trusting has a lot of.
We had this discussion when we were updating our public invited to be heard. Isn't there something that's in the charter? And it might be pertaining to boards and
There is.
commissions.
No.
But yeah, is it public invited to be heard as well?
Or that's your, I believe that's your rules of procedure.
Rules and procedure is the public invited to be heard part, but the boards and commissions.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, what I want to show is this codes, which are mass.
From the charter.
They're all
Yes.
over the map. Right.
No,
I mean, I think that
just went away. It went away.
The map,
Right behind it.
So go ahead. I'm gonna hand it over to Eugene.
Just on your specific question.
Yes.
Under Charter 3.9 for council meetings, all regular and special meetings of the council shall be open to the public, and citizens and employees shall have a reasonable opportunity to be heard. That is the basis of public invited. Open meeting law just says the public has a right to attend your meetings. They don't have a right to participate or give testimony.
Yeah.
And so it is this charter provision that leads to public invited to be heard. In 2023, the council amended their rules of procedure for first call public invited to be heard. Only Longmont residents with a Longmont address and employees of the city of Longmont will be heard. And then anybody can speak in final call, or study sessions, just one public invited to be heard, anybody can speak.
Yes.
So those are the boundaries set up by city council.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that's a good policy, good practice. It's not written in stone. I get it, but I also feel that there's generally only a handful of folks that would like this to happen. The rest of the community is pretty understanding about why we would want to hear from people who are living actually in and getting a city bill and have a,
Look for it. That
Well,
sounds
that,
great.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah,
that
yeah.
was gonna be my point, Mayor Pro Tem, is that a lot of our LPC customers, a lot of folks that work with and rely on the city are not allowed to speak at First Call Public Invited to be heard because they live in enclaves, because they have, I mean, I use the example of my grandmother who lived in hygiene for 30 years and was a
Show you
Longmont,
where Longmont is.
City of Longmont customer. Under our rules, she would not have been able to speak at First Call Public Invited to be heard. We have a number of folks, I think of the Schlegel neighborhood, for example, who's been really active and advocates on different projects, and they aren't able to speak on those issues. And I think, one thing we've
Yeah.
heard of, yeah.
Okay,
The
here,
enclaves,
this
yeah.
is 80501, it's somewhat outside the city, this red line is the city. Here's 80503, goes out to Niwot. Here's 80504, goes out to Firestone, and of course quite a bit further north. So I was thinking, if we just tailored it around, if you had a Longmont zip code, but it's all over the area, the region, And I don't know how you're figuring out whether people are in or out, because look at these little enclaves.
Yeah.
And then this is beyond, Highway 66. So,
does Niwot get electricity from Longmont?
no.
And so,
Good idea.
so maybe it's just
Utility customers.
utility customers that if this is truly important to
So
Councilman Warren.
when the people fill out their list, and I'm looking through there, if there's an address I don't recognize, I'll look it up. And if it falls outside the city limit, then, I'll say, I'll skip that one. I guess I don't have access to people's utilities.
Yeah, that's
And I am
the
not
problem.
gonna be
Can we start with, should we allow people that are just outside the city limits but live very
That have
close,
a
work,
Longmont.
and have, when I look at that wall out there, the Kiteleys are on the wall for being mayor, and their property is across from the Olander farm, so almost in Meany, some of their property. And so I wonder if, historically, the agricultural people that lived here could have spoken to council if they had those rules. And I know that question gets asked a lot.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so, yeah, go ahead.
I do think that some residents who are outside of the city limits should be able to come to council and speak, and if they make it in time to put their name first, second, third on the list, then that should be the order that it's honored. I don't know how we would go about drawing that boundary. Maybe we draw the boundary. Maybe we recreate one around who's then included in that, because it doesn't look like there's, whether it's area code or maps, I think I've had this conversation around maybe St. Vrain Valley School District, but then that extends into Firestone, so that's not gonna work. But I have heard from enough folks that they are impacted by some of the city decisions that do happen, and they would like a voice that they don't currently have, and so.
Go ahead. He hasn't spoken.
So I guess I have a broad question, which is, what problem are we trying to solve? And I'm not sure I clearly know the answer to that with this conversation. I get we want to. There are many ways people can get in touch with us. There are many events that people can show up to and speak, whether they have an address or not. There's a very narrow moment in this broader conversation where people cannot speak at a certain times in the meeting if they don't have a Longmont address. So I bring that up because there are so many different ways to get emails from people outside of the city of Longmont regularly. We have coffees with council and other engagement opportunities. I talk to people who live outside of the city when we do the farmers market tables, and they come up and they're there because it's a county farmers market. It's a logical thing. County, I have helped facilitate meetings with county residents, with some of our staff, and some other Longmont residents when there's an issue that affects them. So I guess I would ask, what problem are we truly trying to solve, and is this the right way to do it? That's the first question I have, and then the broader comment of if we were to entertain something, the easiest boundary to draw would probably be our municipal borders, where we include anyone within the municipal boundary. Like, so basically, Connie enclaves would be allowed. It doesn't help everyone, but we're not letting people in Kansas talk, so we have to draw a boundary at some point.
There was a period of time during the gun conversation. Yeah, where you.
They can still email
They
us.
could.
I get emails about the airport.
They
from people
came
in
to
North
talk.
Carolina.
They came to talk.
And I just wanna point out.
Yeah, hold on, Marcy had his hand up for.
To Councilmember Popkins' point, I think that the concern is when we are dealing with issues that impact not just folks within, the official city of Longmont limits, but because we own our own utility, because we have extensive resources within our city, Next Light, et cetera, that folks access regularly, the choices that we make as a council impact people broadly. You're right, like, this is not a free speech concern necessarily, this is not a First Amendment concern. It's a practical concern of how we remain accessible to folks and how folks access us and the way that we are perceived to be able to be accessed, right? Where if we are limiting, really active members of our community from engaging with us in the way that they choose to because they arbitrarily live across the street from what is considered the official boundary, or they live in Schlegel, or they live in another enclave, I think that's limiting for us. And I also, think about folks, we've had some long meetings of late, and I think about the folks that have chosen to wait for, 7 hours to talk to us, and whether that is honestly fair on our part to ask that of folks, especially if we're talking about folks that are customers of the city, folks that engage with us regularly. And I wanted to mention, I was recently at a county commissioners hearing for some issues. They do digital sign-in for speakers, and they keep the list public. If you've ever been to a public hearing of the county commissioners, the list is kept and tracked consistently. I am sure there are tools that we could create that would geolocate somebody by entering their address on the form. That list would be done digitally, and we would know whether they were within whatever boundary existed. I know that's more work for staff, I understand that, but these are solvable problems if the will exists to solve them. And for me, it does. I think this is a way that we can be more accessible, more engaging with folks, and try to address some of the efficiency stuff.
Well, and I'm gonna give an example of, and I think when we were looking at the Distal Toll property and the folks that live there, were they Longmont? What was their address? Like,
No,
if they
they're
wrote their
Weld
address,
County.
I know it's
And
Weld
then-
County,
and then
but
in
if
that
they
little
wrote their
section down
address,
there.
if they wrote their address to mail a letter, would they write down the city, Longmont, Colorado? Yes. I think so, yeah, they would.
Well,
So,
again, some are Firestone and some are
Firestone, okay. So, but so then people who were impacted did not get to speak at first call public invited to be heard when we were making a decision that would have had great impact on their livelihood.
Yes, and it was mentioned.
So
That we can't
that's,
even
yes.
speak, and this greatly impacts us.
So, and go ahead.
Even on second reading.
I would
Just
Yeah.
a quick word about historical context. I think some of the issues that council was facing when they put these new restrictions in were a lot of people from out of town. I think it was guns.
Mm-hmm, it
And
was, yeah.
part of the rationale was having protection against flash mobbing from people out of town.
Yeah.
And two, an additional rationale that goes hand in hand is, let's get to Longmont, the business agenda earlier.
Yeah.
Let's hear from our Longmont residents and employees
Yes.
first. And it was rough justice. Yeah, there are some people impacted in this toll, but they were trying to prevent the flash mob. And
Well,
there
I-
were traveling circuses going.
Yeah.
on.
And I think.
There will be again.
And there will be again, yeah.
I think what prompted it to Eugene's point was, I wanna say that it was Fort Collins, Boulder, Thornton, that meetings were actually canceled
Oh, yes.
during that period because of those issues. So I think it was just what was happening at the time that led that council to make that decision.
I think we were trying to get ahead of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the slippery slope here of, okay, so we go down this path here and we open it up, this conversation up again, and some unforeseen event like the gun situation reopens, and now we've got people that are, talking about PO boxes and stuff like that for convenience sake. But more importantly, about now are we gonna have the next conversation about who can be on boards and commissions? And so, I mean, it start going, if you start,
There'd be a charter change.
and it's all these little things that kind of keep chipping away at the time that we have to actually get to the general business of the city.
Are we talking about more than just first call public invited to be heard here?
Because at study
That's the
session,
restriction.
anyone can talk. At final call, public invited to be heard, anyone can talk.
But-
So it's just the first call, public invited to be heard on our regular session, so it's not even every month.
And maybe.
I mean, every week.
Maybe it could be open to people who have something on the agenda that directly relates to them.
So.
And we would have been
I
there till
need-
3 a.m. in the landing fees discussion last fall, because there were plenty of people who had probably flown in for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you
But
wouldn't
then
be
when
here,
some
so that's
also
the
live-
Physical address
Yeah.
is not,
Longmont or
Longmont.
Longmont County,
yeah.
around
Yeah.
Longmont. Is there a reason why you have to work for the city to be able to speak, or if you work in the city in the
Isn't it
public?
in our charter
The
that we
charter
give
says employees.
offer, employees have an opportunity to speak? Yes. Call cover, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
One thing that I would like to see is if we can just square off the city, because like the enclaves, like there's some parts of town that like
You wouldn't know they were an enclave.
belong to that community, but they're not included. I know one employee that lives in a little box somewhere up there, and they're not, you know, they're not roped in. So like, for me, I would like to see like at least where, you know, to square off
outer-
those squiggly lines. But then the mayor's gonna have to
And-
figure out.
Yeah, it's true.
Just create a heart.
Yeah, okay, okay. This is gonna be an ongoing conversation. I need time to think about it.
Yes.
Okay, so
Okay.
we are, yes, thank you. We're done. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn and see you on the other side.